Happy St. Patrick's Day! The sun is shining and winter is heading into hibernation. It's clear why the color green is so significant to the Irish celebration of St. Patrick. It's a sign of the seasons changing, out with winter white and in with spring green. Welcome to Summer Bakes the World. On this channel, we bake traditional breads and dishes from all over the world, while peppering in a little history and lots of tips. St. Patrick was not Irish. He was actually British and was never canonized or officially recognized as a saint, big S, in the Catholic Church. He lived during the 4th and 5th centuries, though his specific birth date is unknown. At 16 years of age, he was taken prisoner by Irish raiders from his wealthy British family's estate. While in captivity in Ireland, he worked as a shepherd, alone most of the time. Religion was his means of mental escape. After physically escaping from Ireland and returning to Britain, he became a priest and felt a calling to return to Ireland and spread Christianity, which was already present throughout Ireland. With a strong knowledge of Irish culture, or Celtic culture at the time, he was able to connect Christianity with Celtic traditions, thus being successful in his quest. The Irish celebrate St. Patrick on March 17th, specifically because that was the date of his death. It was after his death that the impact of his life became profound for the Irish. They relished in telling stories of this man who became their most notable saint. During this time, legendary stories and myths roamed Europe about his life, thus naming him a saint by popular acclaim only. While tales were exaggerated about his life, scholars, having analyzed his writings, determined that Patrick was indeed a person of good character. He was not the most educated man, but I love the quote by scholar D.A. Benchy, who stated that, in describing this man, the moral and spiritual greatness of the man shines through every stumbling sentence of his rustic Latin. I love this quote because it describes the average person, like me. It simply says that although we may not be the smartest or the wisest, if we put our heart and soul into something we believe, our genuine purpose shines through and is seen and believed. Given the season and the date, the legend I like most about St. Patrick is this: the purpose of the shamrock, which is the 3-leaf clover. Since St. Patrick was a religious man, the clover is the perfect symbol for him. The 3 leaves on the shamrock represent the concept of the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In Ireland, wearing the shamrock emphasizes St. Patrick's purpose in life: to spread Christianity. That is why the shamrock is the national flower of Ireland and is worn on lapels every St. Patrick's Day. In honor of St. Patrick, since my last bake was the 4-ingredient Irish soda bread that focused on Southern Ireland, I felt it was only fair to also highlight Northern Ireland, since they are very different. With that, today we're making the traditional Northern Ireland Irish potato farls. Sounds like a weird word, huh? The recipe is authentic from Northern Ireland. See the recipe link in the description below this video. Potato farls, though, are simply a potato pancake. It's a thick potato dough, flattened like a very thick pancake and cooked in a skillet. Think crispy exterior with a fluffy interior. It's simple, quick to make, and perfect for breakfast, commonly eaten with eggs, bacon, sausage, mushrooms, tomatoes, onions, you name it. To get started, here are the ingredients. The star of the show are the potatoes. You need a good mashing potato like Yukon Gold or russets. I'm using russets today. All-purpose flour, butter, baking powder, and finally salt and pepper for seasoning. Notice we have no liquid ingredients. The cooked potatoes will take the place of the liquid as the binder in this recipe. This pancake, however, is nothing like a pancake you're used to eating in the United States. The uniqueness of this recipe is that we have an actual dough that we manipulate and knead. Strange, huh? Our first step is to prepare and cook the potatoes. Yes, we are actually making mashed potatoes for this recipe, and that is the main ingredient. We're going to need 625 grams of potatoes. Now granted, this is an Irish authentic recipe, so I'm going to tell you everything in grams and then we'll do a little bit of conversion. Honestly, the United States really is about the only country that uses cups and spoons to measure things. Most people in the world will use a simple scale. So I'm going to measure out 625 grams of potatoes so that you know what that looks like, and then you can make that call yourself. On my scale, the unit is in grams. I'm just using a stainless steel bowl. Whenever you put a container on your scale, make sure you tare it to 0 before you add any ingredients into it. We're going to be using about 2 medium-sized potatoes. That actually equals 632 grams. So we're 6 grams off, but that's good enough because we're going to be peeling them anyway. So now all we simply need to do is to peel our potatoes. And I'm going to use a bowl here in which I can put all my garbage and then just dump it out when I'm done, or put it in the compost because we compost in my house out back. All right, our potatoes have been peeled. Notice all contained in a bowl. It makes it easy to wipe them out and put them in the garbage or compost. I rinsed my potatoes off and dried them just a little bit so that we don't have any extra dirt that's on them. We just need to pretty much quarter them, but since mine are relatively large, I'm probably going to cut mine a little smaller than that because that's how I do my mashed potatoes. Once you cut them up, we're going to put them in a saucepan. Cut them one way, then rotate them, and then cut them the other way. Careful with your fingers when you're slicing here. Certainly don't want to cut your fingers. So big chunks. Should be about relatively the same size. Mine are rarely about the same size, but I think that's supposed to be the idea. We're going to cover the potatoes with water. Be sure to use cold water because you want them to cook uniformly, and if you use hot water, the outside of the potato will cook much quicker than the inside of the potato. Water enough to cover the potatoes, as you see here. And whenever you're cooking potatoes or pasta for that matter, you always want your water to be the salinity of the sea. So it should be very salty. I'm going to put about 1/2 of a tablespoon of salt in here first. Once I put all my salt in, give it just a quick little stir, and then I do a little taste. If you can taste the salt, then it's salty enough. I don't think mine's salty enough. I'm starting to get, so I'm going to do about another about 1/4 of a tablespoon here. And the reason you do that is when the potatoes soak in the water, they're going to be soaking in the saltiness as well. And you'll have less salt you need to add at the end because the potatoes will not absorb as much salt after they've been cooked than they do when they're actually soaking in the water. Okay, try a different finger. That's pretty good. So I would do close to a tablespoon of water, and that's usually how I cook my potatoes anyway. Place your saucepan on a burner, turn it on high. At this point, we're going to allow the water to boil. The water is now boiling, so we're going to set our timer for 15 minutes, because that's how long it's going to take for these potatoes to soften. I'm going to decrease the heat to a medium-low so that the water doesn't continue to boil and boil over. We're going to cover the potatoes in the water with a lid, but allowing steam to escape, and also so that the water doesn't boil over. And you can adjust the temperature. If it tends to boil too much, just take it down some. If it stops simmering, then raise it a little bit, and we'll check back in 15 minutes. Our 15-minute timer just went off, so let's give these guys a cut through and see if they're soft enough. If your potatoes are unequal size, pick a potato that looks larger than the others and check for doneness. That looks soft enough to me. All right, and that was 15 minutes for potatoes of this size. Let's turn off the temperature. We've turned off the timer. Now let's go drain them at the sink. Let's drain our potatoes. We're going to put the potatoes back into our pot. So we're going to put these back over on the stove with the heat on low and allow these to dry out because we need a dry potato before we rice it and mix it with the other ingredients. So we're back to the stove. I'm going to turn our burner on low and just let these dry out for a few minutes. We want them completely dry. The potatoes have only been sitting on the stove for a few minutes and they're no longer sizzling, so that tells me that they are dried out. And you can see a little bit of potato at the bottom of the pan, so these are ready to go. And notice how easily they are mushing up with just my spoon here. All right, so let's turn the stove off. And let's go over to the counter with these. It's mashed potato time. So you can mash these with a standard potato masher. You could use a spoon because they're soft and they're ready to be mashed easily. Today I'm going to use my potato ricer. I love to use my ricer to mash potatoes. They make the softest mashed potatoes. If you use the ricer, use the attachment with the smallest holes. There are other attachments that come with the ricer, but I prefer the smaller holes. It makes a fluffier potato. And then you just put your attachment at the bottom with the rounded side up. and then add this little guy that holds the attachment in place. And then all you have to do is scoop your potato in the ricer. Careful not to scoop too much in or you'll make a huge mess, which I often do. And just scoop a bit into your potato ricer, and then notice how quickly and easily they come out. Again, you could just use a regular potato masher if you want. It's whatever you have. These will make a light, fluffy potato, and they also kind of remove some of the liquid too. Notice how quickly and easily that comes out. You can use potato ricers for lots of things. You can juice fruit like oranges, lemons. You could mince your garlic. You could soften vegetables for baby food. You could put any cooked tuber in here, rutabagas, whatever you want, if you wanted to have a nice little mash. In fact, although I have not done this, but you could theoretically, if you want mashed potatoes and you don't want to have to cut the skins off before you cook them, cook the potatoes with the skins off, then put them in the masher, and the skins will be left in the masher once you rice the potatoes. I would imagine you have to remove some of the skins as you're mashing the potatoes because they'll just cover the bottom and coat the bottom of the ricer and you wouldn't be able to get all your potatoes in. All right, guys, that's it. Potatoes are smashed, riced, and ready to be used in our recipe. To our riced potatoes, we're gonna add 2 tablespoons of melted butter. So I'm just going to cut mine in chunks here, my 2 tablespoons. I'm gonna put it in the microwave. You could also melt your butter over the stove if you don't have a microwave. All right, a total of 25 seconds. Perfect, that's with stirring in between intervals. We're just gonna pour this over our potatoes. This is 2 tablespoons of melted butter. And since our potatoes are so beautifully riced, we don't need to do any mashing because we want to keep them light and fluffy. So we're just going to stir the butter in. And we're going to be kneading these a little later anyway, so we don't need to mash them up too much. To the butter that's in the potatoes, we're going to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and then we're going to add 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. Not to be perfect. And then we're gonna add a teaspoon, 1 full teaspoon of baking powder. That way it gives the potato pancake a rise while it's cooking. And lastly, we're gonna add 120 grams of all-purpose flour. And I'm gonna weigh mine because that's how I would do it in Ireland. 120 grams should be roughly about 1 cup. You wanna fluff your flour just so that it stays nice and fluffy and when we add it to the potatoes. I'm at 120 grams, it's probably a little less than 1 cup, but if you added a cup, I'm sure it wouldn't hurt that much. All right, so just pour your flour in with the other ingredients, and then we're just going to stir. Try to mix it in fairly well. This is so strange that we're not adding any liquid to this. To me it is, because as you know, someone who enjoys baking, it's like you always have some liquid. Take a look at that. This is where we treat our pancake batter, I use that loosely, like a bread dough. It's time to knead. We need to prepare a surface on which we can knead. I'm just going to put down a towel and my favorite kneading surface. We need a little bit of flour. We're on our surface, pull up your sleeves. Ooh, what an interesting feel to this dough. Notice how it comes together so easily. You know, I don't want to put too much flour in here because we want this pancake to be nice and light and fluffy. I don't think it's meant to knead a lot. I think it's only meant to make sure everything is well combined and that you've got a nice sturdy dough that we can cut into. We're only going to knead this enough to make a nice smooth dough. I think that this is what we want here. I mean, it looks like a regular bread dough, doesn't it? I'm going to shape mine into a bit of a rectangle because we need to cut this in half. We're going to make 2 different farls. Each farl has quarters. By the way, did you know that farl means quarters? It comes from the Gaelic word fardell. That means quarters. So we're making Irish potato farls, or you can translate it to Irish potato quarters. We cut it in half. We're going to move 1 half aside, and then we're going to flatten this other half, and we're going to cut it into quarters. Fardells. Farls. We want it to be a round shape because it should look like a pancake, even though it's thick pancake. For this round, it needs to be about 3/4 of an inch thick. So let's see if we have patted ours out to that. And yes, that looks really good. For perspective, 3/4 of an inch thick is about 6.5 inches in diameter. Now we're gonna cut it into the farls, which is the quarters. So we cut through one side and then do another cut on the other side. So notice how easily that cut through and I didn't even flour my knife. There we go. That's what you're about to cook in the skillet. They should have a little bit of flour on them. So just dust them a little bit with flour. That way they'll cook easily in the pan and not stick. Now we're just going to do the same with the other half of our dough. So this is going to make 8 farls. Pat it out, keep that round shape. Make sure you've got flour on your surface with our knife. Cut it in half and then crossways into we have quarters. Beautiful, isn't that? So simple too. Let's dust it in flour. All right, these guys are ready to be cooked in a skillet over a stove. No baking in the oven today, just the stove. Over at the stove, we're gonna add a tablespoon of butter to the skillet. And I'm using a 12-inch skillet. And we're gonna turn the skillet over onto medium-high and let the butter melt. Butter is nice and melted, so I just want to move it around the pan a bit. And let's add 4 of our farls. We could probably put more than 4 in, but we'll do 4 at a time in case you have a smaller skillet. So we're gonna let these cook for 4 minutes on this side. The recipe didn't call for it, but I'm actually gonna cover up my skillet just for a couple of minutes because I want to make sure that the steam stays on the inside and heats up the internal farl. I'm afraid it's going to be too cold on the inside and then warm and crispy on the outside. We want that inside to heat up. So I'm just going to put my lid on it until it's time to turn. Right, my 4-minute timer just went off. Let's take a look and see if these guys are brown and crispy looking on the underside. They look good. I'm going to turn these over. Notice how pretty that is. And I'm not going to put the lid on once I flip them because we want to make sure that top stays crispy. And if I put the lid on the skillet, all it's going to do is create steam and it'll soften the tops. So I'm only going to put the lid on for the first 4 minutes of each batch. I'm going to set the timer for 4 more minutes. There goes the timer, 4 minutes. I ended up turning the heat down just a little bit because they were starting to brown quite a bit at the bottom. So look how beautiful they are. They are ready. And they feel so light in the center. I mean, I can just squeeze that center, super light and fluffy. So I'm just going to put these on paper towels on a plate in case they need to do any draining, which they're fine as they are, I think. Besides, who doesn't want a little bit extra butter on potatoes? So I'm gonna add another tablespoon of butter to the skillet. Let that melt. So I have to turn my heat down just a bit since that is sizzling quite a bit. We're gonna add our second set of 4 here. This is the second batch. I'm actually gonna spread them out a little bit more so they're easier to flip over to get my spatula in there. And another batch of farls, the quarters. So 4 minutes. Our timer is going off again. So as with the first batch, I did put the lid on before I flipped them over so they had enough time to cook in the inside, heat up. They are definitely ready to flip. Notice how nice and crispy they look on the outside. All right, I'm gonna leave the lid off, but I want to set the timer for 4 minutes. Timer just went off. Let's take a look at the underside of these. I ended up turning my heat down just a little bit more. Oh yeah, those are beautiful. All right, they're ready. Okay, let's take them out and put them over on our paper towel. Drain just a bit. Our beautiful farls are ready. Farls are meant to be eaten right out of the skillet. So while they're still hot, just like you would a pancake. So let's cut into this and see what it looks like on the inside. Definitely has a crispy crust on the outside. Notice how soft and tender it is on the inside. And that's what it should look like. It's supposed to be fluffy and tender on the inside. I'll squeeze it so you can get a little better view of it. And then of course the outside is meant to be crusty and brown. Let's taste. Since this dish has some gluten in it from the flour, Scott will have to do the honors today in tasting it. Happy St. Patty's Day.
Yeah, potatoes, huh?
Yeah, are you wearing green?
Yes.
Don't give me the eye color.
Hair color.
Yeah, we'll go with the hair color, totally. Irish potato farls. Would you mind giving a taste, trying it, and tell us what you think? So while you're tasting this, let me give you a quick little background. This is a traditional Northern Ireland breakfast bake made with primarily potatoes, a little bit of flour, butter, baking powder, salt, and pepper for seasoning. It's a very simple recipe that resembles a pancake, but it is actually a bread. It's a dough, no wet ingredients in this recipe. It truly is a potato dough cooked in the skillet, no rising was needed, and it was not baked in the oven. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, as I tasted and listening to what you were saying, it seems like a little bit of a different take on the hash browns.
Oh, cool. Hash browns don't have flour in them. These do, but they're seasoned like hash browns, so I can see why you would say that.
Yeah, because hash browns are fried, right?
Yes.
And this was fried, I'm assuming.
Yep.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a type of bread that would be good for breakfast. It's savory. I can taste the salt.
Yeah, you know, when I made this recipe, I suggested to highly salt the water. So what I would do is still recommend that, but before you add any additional salt to the recipe, when you add the other ingredients, get a taste of the potato first and make sure you have enough salt that you're happy with so you don't add any additional salt. So that's a way to make sure you don't add too much salt.
It's nice and fluffy on the inside. It's not really dense. The outside is crispy. Yeah, good. So it would be kind of just eaten in the same way that in the United States we eat hash browns as just kind of a side.
I think that's a good comparison.
Would you put anything on it?
A good question. I think it's mainly, you could put some butter on it, but no, keep it pretty simple.
Yeah.
I think if you want some hot sauce would probably be good on it. You can store these cooked in the fridge for up to 3 days or freeze them between sheets of parchment paper before cooking them in the skillet, then allow them to thaw on the counter, then cook them like you normally would. This is such a clean and filling dish, perfect for your St. Paddy's Day breakfast or breakfast for any day of the week. Of course, we like breakfast for dinner too, so you could go that route as well. In honor of St. Patrick, cook a plate of these for your family this week or weekend and relish in the change of seasons as we move into spring. Maybe add a shamrock or clover to decorate your plate. With that, remember that while St. Patrick was not a true saint, just a simple man, but a man full of genuine desire and inspiration that became infectious. I think we all could take a note of that going into a new season, don't you?
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. So thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel and share my videos with your family and friends. I appreciate your support. Until next time, try something new, be a little adventurous in the kitchen, and of course, go bake the world.